Imagine standing on the edge of a frozen, unforgiving wasteland, where every breath could be your last, and the only thing keeping you alive is the trust you place in your unlikely companions. Would you survive? In the heart of the galaxy's most prestigious academy, cadets are pushed beyond their limits, facing trials that no being has ever conquered. But this is no ordinary test. This is the Galactic Academy's deadliest challenge, a journey where failure means death and survival is nothing short of a miracle. What will happen when a human, driven by her father's legendary legacy, is thrown into a nightmare world with no escape in sight? As alliances are forged and fears take hold, the real question isn't just about survival. It's about discovering who you truly are when everything else is stripped away. Are you ready to uncover the secrets of surviving the unsurvivable? Because once you start, there's no turning back. The Galactic Academy was a place like no other, where young cadets from every species in the galaxy came to learn the most critical lessons: survival, diplomacy, and resilience. Among these cadets was Sarah, a human, who stood out not only because she was one of the few humans, but because she had something to prove. The weight of her father's legacy, a legendary explorer, loomed over her. Every step she took in the academy was a step toward living up to the greatness expected of her. But this story isn't just about Sarah. It's about the unlikely friendships forged in the crucible of extreme survival. It's about Zix, a creature from the cold deserts of Zorblas, who was as sharp as the icy winds of his home planet, and Velara, a timid yet curious being from the lush, peaceful world of Lantor. Together, they would face trials that none of them could have anticipated. Chapter 1. The beginning of the end. The day started like any other. The cadets had gathered in the main hall, the air buzzing with the usual chatter. But there was an undercurrent of something different today, a sense of foreboding that none of them could quite place. The head of the academy, Professor Zorblas, was known for his unpredictable teaching methods, but today's announcement caught everyone off guard. Cadets, today marks the beginning of your ultimate test, Extreme Survival 101 on Hoth-Ex. Gasps filled the room. Hoth-Ex was notorious, a Class 1 death world, a planet actively trying to kill anything that dared set foot on its surface. The cadets had trained for harsh environments, but nothing like this. The survival rate on such worlds was minimal, even for seasoned explorers. Sarah's heart raced. This was her chance to prove herself, but the fear gnawed at the edges of her resolve. She glanced at Zix, who returned a look that said he was just as concerned, if not more. Velara seemed on the verge of panic, her small frame trembling slightly. But there was no turning back now. Chapter 2. Into the Unknown. The journey to Hoth-Ex was long and tense. The transport ship felt colder than usual, or perhaps it was just the chilling reality of what lay ahead. The cadets were given their instructions: stick to your groups, rely on each other, and remember, survival is about more than just physical endurance. It's about mental resilience, adaptability, and sometimes sheer willpower. Sarah couldn't help but think of her father. He had survived countless missions in places just as deadly, but he always said it wasn't strength or skill that saved him. It was his ability to keep a cool head when everything around him was falling apart. As they neared the planet, the tension in the ship was palpable. Everyone was silently preparing themselves for what was to come. Sarah found herself next to Zix. "You nervous?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nervous?" Zix replied, his voice betraying the calm demeanor he was trying to project. "Nervous doesn't begin to cover it. But then again, I didn't sign up for this expecting it to be easy." Sarah nodded. "We'll make it through. We have to." The ship landed with a jarring thud on the frozen surface of Hoth-Ex. As the doors opened, a blast of icy wind hit them, making them gasp. The landscape was a nightmare, a vast, desolate tundra with jagged mountains and treacherous terrain. The sky was a dark, swirling mass of clouds, and the air was thick with the promise of danger. But there was no time to marvel at the deadly beauty of the planet. The first task was simple: survive the first night. Chapter 3. The First Night. Survival, as it turned out, was anything but simple. The temperature dropped rapidly as night fell, and the cadets huddled together in makeshift shelters. The cold seeped into their bones, making even the simplest tasks feel impossible. Sarah, Zix, and Velara had managed to find a small cave to take refuge in. It wasn't much, but it was better than braving the open tundra. They took turns keeping watch, but sleep was elusive. Every sound, every movement outside the cave sent a jolt of fear through them. At one point, Velara, who was on watch, shook Sarah awake. "Did you hear that?" Sarah strained her ears. There was a faint rumbling sound growing louder by the second. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to shake violently. An earthquake. Sarah's mind raced. Earthquakes on Death Worlds weren't like the ones back home. Here, they could trigger avalanches, open chasms, or worse. "Out! We need to get out of here," she yelled, grabbing Zix and Velara. They stumbled out of the cave just as a massive boulder crashed down where they had been moments before. The ground continued to heave, and they had to fight to stay on their feet. The rumbling subsided as quickly as it had started, leaving them in a terrifying silence. They were safe for now, but the night was far from over. Chapter 4: Acid Geysers and Alien Wildlife. Morning on Hoth-Ex brought no relief. The temperature was barely above freezing, and the sky was still a dark, ominous grey. But the real danger lay in the acid geysers that dotted the landscape. They were unpredictable, spewing deadly acid at random intervals, capable of melting through anything they touched. The group had to navigate through a field of these geysers. It was a game of patience and timing, waiting for the right moment to move, hoping the next geyser wouldn't erupt right beneath their feet. Zix was the first to misstep. A geyser erupted just as he was crossing, splashing acid onto his leg. He cried out in pain, but there was no time to stop. Sarah and Velara quickly pulled him to safety, and Sarah used what little first aid knowledge she had to treat the burn. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep Zix moving. The danger wasn't over, though. As they moved forward, they encountered the planet's wildlife, a predatory creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It was massive, with razor-sharp claws and teeth designed to tear through even the toughest of prey. The creature locked eyes on them, and in that moment, Sarah knew they were in trouble. There was no way they could outrun it, and fighting it was out of the question. But Sarah's mind was racing. She had to find a way to outsmart it. "Climb," she shouted, spotting a cluster of tall, jagged rocks nearby. The creature might be fast on the ground, but it was too large to scale the rocks quickly. They scrambled up the rocks, barely out of reach as the creature swiped at them. From their perch, they could see the creature circling below, waiting for them to make a mistake. It was a standoff, one that would only end when one side made a move. Chapter 5: The Chasm of Eternal Screams. Hours passed, and the creature finally lost interest, slinking back into the shadows. The group cautiously climbed down, but they knew they couldn't stay there. They had to keep moving. Their next challenge was even more daunting, a massive chasm that seemed to stretch endlessly in both directions. It was known as the Chasm of Eternal Screams, named for the eerie wails that echoed from its depths. Crossing it seemed impossible, but there was no other way. The Academy had provided them with equipment to build a makeshift bridge, but the materials were flimsy, and the chasm was wide. As they worked, Velara's fear began to take over. Her hands shook so badly that she almost dropped one of the ropes into the abyss. "Velara, focus. We need you," Sarah urged, trying to keep her calm. Velara took a deep breath, nodded, and forced herself to steady her hands. Slowly, they managed to construct a bridge that looked barely stable enough to hold their weight. Sarah was the first to cross. She moved slowly, testing each step before putting her full weight on the bridge. The wood creaked ominously, but it held. Zix followed, his injured leg making the crossing even more treacherous. Finally, it was Velara's turn. She hesitated, looking down into the chasm. The wails from below seemed to grow louder, as if they were calling to her. But with a deep breath, she took the first step. Halfway across, the bridge began to sway dangerously. Velara froze, fear paralyzing her. "I can't do it. I'm going to fall." "You can do this, Velara. Just keep moving, one step at a time," Sarah called out, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Velara forced herself to move inch by inch. Finally, with a last desperate lunge, she made it to the other side, collapsing into Sarah's arms, shaking with relief. But as they caught their breath, the ground beneath them began to shake again. Another earthquake, and this time it was much stronger. The bridge they had just crossed snapped and fell into the chasm, leaving them stranded on the narrow ledge. Chapter 6: The Labyrinth of Despair. With the bridge gone, they had no choice but to press on through the only other path available, a narrow tunnel that led deep into the heart of the mountain. The tunnel soon opened up into a vast labyrinthine cave system, filled with twisting passages and dead ends. The labyrinth was aptly named the Labyrinth of Despair. It was said that those who entered often never found their way out. The darkness was oppressive, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. As they navigated the maze, their torches flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Every sound echoed, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. More than once, they found themselves going in circles, their hope dwindling with each wrong turn. Zix, who had been stoic throughout the ordeal, finally reached his breaking point. "We're never going to make it out of here. This is where we die," he muttered, sinking to the ground. Sarah refused to give in to despair. "We're not done yet. We've made it this far, and we're going to keep going, together." Her words stirred something in Velara, who had been quiet for most of the journey. "She's right. We've faced worse, and we've come out the other side. We can do this." They continued on, driven by a determination to survive. Hours passed, or perhaps it was days. Time had lost all meaning in the endless darkness. But eventually, they saw it, a faint light in the distance, a sign that they were close to the exit. With renewed energy, they hurried toward the light, ignoring their exhaustion and pain. When they finally emerged from the labyrinth, they found themselves on the edge of a vast frozen lake. Chapter 7: The Final Trial. The lake was their final obstacle. The Academy's instructions were clear: cross the lake, and you'll find the extraction point on the other side. But the ice was thin, and the freezing water below was a death sentence for anyone who fell in. They tied themselves together with ropes, knowing that if one of them fell, the others would have a chance to pull them out. Sarah led the way, testing the ice with each step. The cracking sounds beneath her feet sent chills down her spine. Halfway across, the ice gave way beneath Zix. He plunged into the icy water, the shock of the cold nearly sending him into unconsciousness. But the ropes held, and Sarah and Velara pulled him out with all their strength. Zix was shivering uncontrollably, his skin turning blue from the cold. They couldn't stop to warm him up. The ice was still cracking, and they had to keep moving. With sheer determination, they made it to the other side, collapsing on the snow-covered ground, exhausted but alive. Chapter 8: The Rescue. As they lay there, too tired to move, they heard the sound of engines in the distance. The rescue team had arrived, their ship descending from the sky like an angel of mercy. They had made it. The cadets were airlifted back to the academy, where they were met with cheers and applause from their fellow cadets and instructors. They had survived Hoth-Ex, something that many had thought impossible. But the experience had changed them. They were no longer just cadets. They were survivors, bonded by the trials they had faced together. Sarah had proven herself, not just to the academy, but to herself. She had lived up to her father's legacy and forged her own path. Zix and Velara, too, had grown in ways they hadn't expected. Zix had learned that strength wasn't just about physical power, but about perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. Velara had discovered a courage she didn't know she had, one that came from believing in herself and her friends. Chapter 9: The Aftermath. Back at the academy, life slowly returned to normal, but the memories of Hoth-Ex would stay with them forever. They had been tested in ways that no one could have predicted, and they had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. Sarah, Zix, and Velara remained close friends, their bond unbreakable after everything they had been through. They knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, just as they had on Hoth-Ex. Epilogue: A New Beginning. As Sarah stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars, she thought about the journey she had taken, the lessons she had learned, and the friends she had made along the way. The galaxy was vast and full of unknowns, but she was ready for whatever came next. The trials of Hoth IX had forged her into a true explorer, just like her father before her. And as she gazed into the infinite expanse of space, she knew that her journey was just beginning. The stars held endless possibilities, and she was ready to explore them all. As the rescue team descends from the sky, lifting the exhausted survivors back to safety, one thing becomes crystal clear. This was no ordinary mission. It was a crucible that burned away the weaknesses and doubts, leaving only the raw, unbreakable will to survive. But as Sarah, Zix, and Velara emerge from the icy hell of Hoth IX, the real question lingers. What price do we pay to become stronger? In the end, they weren't just fighting the elements. They were battling the deepest fears within themselves. And now, having faced the ultimate test, they return not just as cadets, but as legends in the making. The Galactic Academy will never forget their names, but will they ever forget what they had to endure? Keep these questions in mind as you leave today. And remember, true strength isn't just about survival. It's about what you learn in the darkest moments. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember to always push beyond the limits, no matter the cost.